welcome back to KK Flips the Script. I know I took a bit of a longer hiatus, but with all the madness going on and, you know, the new year, I was just like, all the stuff that I recorded up until that part had been really like bleak, heavy, you know, material, like Pieces of a Woman and Doubt. So I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna post those now. I'm gonna post those later. But for now, I wanted to talk about a new show on Netflix called Bridgerton that got released on Christmas Day, and it was the perfect Christmas present because it took us right back to Shondaland. She is back like she never left and at a new home. And I'm so glad Netflix picked this one up. So let's get into it. I, for one, love a good period drama. Give me the lies, give me the deceit, the betrayal, the smut, the scandal, all that you can find in this period piece of a show. And I mean, you know, if it's not your deal, it's not your deal, but most people, it is their deal, even if they don't want to admit that they like messy shows like that. Love it. Conversations that have sprung up in light of the show, which I think are, I would say, just as interesting as the actual show. For one, the historical accuracy of the show, right? It is a period piece, but we have a ton of diverse characters. I've seen black people, I've seen Asians, I've seen Indians, I've seen what I wanted to see. Something that you would see in a normal contemporary Shondaland show, which is great, but, you know, people are like, well, is that necessarily historically accurate? According to my sources at PBS.com, when I looked up the Queen Charlotte, you know, she was of African descent. She clearly had some features that made her look like she was of African descent, and she came from a bloodline of Portuguese rulers of African descent. So, I mean, it all makes sense. And then there was also some photos that they had up on PBS's website. I'll try to drop the link on there where it showed like a cousin of the Queen who kind of looks like Lady Danbury in the show. There were black people in England at that time. Of course, there have been black people everywhere, but we haven't seen them thus far in a lot of shows. So it makes you think that we weren't there, but we were. They kind of hint at the backstory. The black people that are in these you know, higher up positions, such as the Duke of Hastings, he got it by way of his father, and it's so important for him to basically keep up appearances and be a strong front for that title of Duke of Hastings and keep it in the bloodline. Like, it's all about, you know, passing it on to the next one, and you cannot be the weak Duke of Hastings, or you go back to being a normal Bassett, I think was their name before they got the title. So it's an interesting way to look at that and how the king granted people certain stations. And then I look back and of course I found cases of where there were people of African descent had been liberated from slavery or enslavement through generations and had come up into these special positions because they were considered special. I thought this was amazing, especially because the only kind of period piece where it kind of showed African Americans or Africans in a different standing in a society like that. The show based on the Anne Rice novel, The Feast of All Saints, where they talked about the freed people of color in Louisiana and mainly in New Orleans, who, you know, you had women who were born free, but they had kind of a second tier family with these big plantation owners, these guys that already had their own wife and their own kids, but had a second family that of course, you know, did not take priority over their main family, their white family. So I thought this infusion is a lot more fresh of that kind of history that we don't get as much. And it didn't feel like they were trying to make it about that, but it is about that. You know what I mean? We don't even have to have that conversation because it already is about that. The Duke of Hastings is the Duke of Hastings because his dad was the Duke of Hastings, because he got that position because he was seen as some special, out of the ordinary person of African descent. Boom. Boom. Now they're trying to stay up there. Boom. Totally understand that. And then that leads up to my next hot topic of conversation that sprung up in light of this show was interracial dating. Is it being fetishized in this show? No. I think that when you watch a Shondaland show, you're gonna see some interracial couples. I don't think it's fetishizing of anything, but that actually goes to my next thing, because I honestly think that Shonda intentionally writes those kind of relationships, because that is another site of conflict. You think about even between Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder, these were, you know, women of color in positions of power, and they're around a lot of people that dominantly don't look like them. They work around a lot of people that don't look like them. So, I mean, in being around them and finding their commonalities, they're gonna date some people within their workspace. A lot of people, they usually date where, you know, I hate to say it like that, but they usually date somebody who's in that, like, that same field or works around that same thing, that understands. But then the conflict usually sneaks up when, you know, you get into topics of race. I don't think Shonda does it because she's like, oh, you know, wouldn't it be great to see this and this together, or this race and that race, and oh, let's do that, and because it's extra, you know, taboo. I don't think she thinks like that, but if y'all take it as taboo, I mean, shit, y'all are watching it, so either way, it's a win-win situation, right? I feel like out of all the things that we've seen in this show, I think the one thing that is not being talked about enough, and what I think is the most fascinating aspect of this kind of period piece kind of show, is the fact that they talk about sex in context. You realize that these women were being married off not knowing much about their bodies, not knowing about how babies are made. A lot of that stuff out of, you know, trying to stay proper and appropriate, they did not talk about. So they were quick to tell them all, like, yeah, you know, you have bled, you can now, you know, go and find somebody to marry, but they don't tell them, like, the mechanics of how. Seeing Daphne navigate through the space of being a newly married woman and thinking her husband can't have kids when actuality he can. Between her losing her virginity and all the way up until, you know, where we are at with them at the end of the season, she has to learn a lot. And it just says a lot too about just like this idealization of marriage and having kids as a whole. Like, when we are brought up, we don't know the whole story, and, you know, we're not usually sat down for long periods of time or having ongoing conversations about all the things that come with that. So I think the fact that the show kind of hammers it home in these times, which we probably don't normally think about, a lot of these girls would not know any better, and she really has to have a collision course, and they are getting down to the specifics of why they show this specifically why the Duke can't have kids in very graphic detail when they're having sex and then after they're having sex, where I'm just like, oh, okay, we're doing all this now. Again, love this show. I'm so excited to see what storylines they come up with leading into the second season, because I mean, I think we know who Lady Whistledown is, and they kind of indicated that, but we're not so sure, right? This is a Shondaland show. She normally doesn't, you know, make things so uncomplicated and simple. We are gonna be doing a few somersaults. Yes, I am there, I am in, and so were 60+ million people who streamed it. That's about it. Thank you so much for joining me this time. Hopefully you like and subscribe. If you watch the show, please comment and let me know your thoughts. I really want to hear them, and I'll see you next time.